Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hello, folks, and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show. My name is Avrum Rosensweig, and indeed what we are experiencing today, or will experience, is Parsha Prose. That is a wonderful show that my dear friend and colleague, Reb Shlomo Gomorrah, and I have been doing for a number of months now. Welcome, Rabbi. How are you?
Baruch Hashem. I think that we covered more than half of the Torah. I mean, you cannot cover the Torah because every time that we speak, we think about like 20 things that we didn't say. But it's quite an accomplishment. I think that we did more than 20, maybe 25 chapters, episodes. So Baruch Hashem, that gave us the strength to do that. As any other Jew over the world, we are so happy to see some of our hostages back, and we pray and think about the ones that are still in Gaza, and hopefully we'll see them soon. Last week was quite interesting, especially the ideas and things that came from Washington. So I guess that the coming weeks are going to be very interesting, to say the least.
Yes, to say the least. I would like to comment, too, that we just received news that 2 soldiers were killed, and they were Defense Force Sergeant Major Ofer Young, 39 years old, from Tel Aviv, and Sergeant Major Avram Tzvi Tzivka Friedman, 43, from Ein Hanatziv. You know what strikes me, Rabbi? I always look at the ages of these soldiers. And the second fellow who was killed, Borch Dayanemet, he was 43 years old. Like, he had a whole life that he has developed, right?
That's terrible. That's just terrible. And I must say, listen, I'm not an expert, but too many things remind me in this story what happened on October 7th. And again, not to criticize, but I think we have to ask ourselves a few questions. How come that like a sole terrorist managed to infiltrate into a quite a protected a place with many soldiers, and he managed actually to kill them from I would say a distance of 0, like something is not good here, and I hope that the new chief of staff is going to deal with it from the very, very, for every soldier and up, because this comes from lack of certain discipline. And, I just remember the day when about 2 years ago, 2 soldiers were killed on the border with Egypt, again, by a sole a Egyptian soldier. And I asked myself, what's going on here? That shouldn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my days in the army. We had a chief of staff. His name was Rafael Eitan, very admirable, Raful. And he was crazy about discipline, and we couldn't understand it. If he would catch a soldier with no beret, he would be thrown to jail, because this is the order. You have to follow the order. And we soldiers saw that he's crazy. And, sometimes, let me tell you the following. There were stories that soldiers stand in Trampiada, these places where soldiers are waiting for someone to...
They're hitchhiking.
Yeah. And sometimes the chief of staff stopped, went out of the car, and told soldiers to put their beret on, because these are the orders, and sometimes they even sent them for an army court. He took it very seriously. We thought that he's crazy, but you know what? Apparently, lack of discipline is an issue of death and life, unfortunately. It shouldn't happen. Someone should be aware, someone should guard. And a sole terrorist cannot enter an army base under any circumstances. And I hope that the new chief of staff is going to take care over this kind of thing, because we don't want these tragedies to happen.
Once again, we want to welcome our viewers and listeners to the Parsha and Prose. We like to begin with what we call Shivim Panim, which is a schmooze between us about things having to do with Israel, the Jewish people, and some personal items as well. Rabbi, in light of what you just said, how critical were you taught? How much were you taught within the IDF and afterwards to be critical of such entities? Generally, when we talk about the military in America, let's say, there's not a lot of criticism about it and how it operates. It's more a lot of praise. But I notice through you and other Israelis that you're very comfortable saying that something went wrong here, there was a mistake, and expressing your views as the need for it to get better.
Exactly. You have to remember, Israel army is a phenomenon. It's based on citizens. Most of the army is built upon citizens who leave everything and go to the army. And this is a model of the Israeli army. We don't hire people to fight our fights. Every Jewish person, every Israeli citizen is part of this army. And it means also that everyone should comfortably criticize where criticism is due. And I can tell you that, at least in my time, and I hope that it continues to be this way, there is an open door to every high officer to listen to your issues. I can tell you, right after Lebanon War, we thought that things went wrong, and we asked an interview with the one who was then the deputy of the chief of staff. His name was Matan Vilnai. Today he became like a political leader. You know, it took us 2 days until we, a group of friends of people who fought in Lebanon, in a heroic battle in Sultan Yaakov, we were invited and we were sitting with him on coffee and cookies. Like, you have to understand, we were privates, or maybe one rank above it, and he's like a general in Tzahal. I'm sure that he had many other things to do. We were sitting together for about half an hour. He listened very carefully to what we said. I don't know what was done with it, but I think this shows you what does it mean to have tzva ha'am, like the army based on citizens. So if you are going to harsh the citizens, you are going to create a situation where you are going to harm and affect the motivation of people to fight for their country, and we cannot allow ourselves anything like this to happen.
Can we apply that same principle of open discussion, of challenging our leadership? Can we apply that principle to our rabbis as well? Because you told me once that because you're a rabbi, that very often people will be reticent about challenging you on issues.
Listen, it all depends on the way people criticize others. It's about rabbis, it's about military stuff, it's about prime minister, it's about ministers, about every person, about our own children and neighbors. The question is why you criticize. If you want to show that you are great and the other one is not, then I would say it's better not to criticize.
Yeah.
But it's not really something that you are going to contribute and to build. It's something that you are going to destroy, and we are not interested in it. As long as criticism sincerely want to improve things, I think it should be welcomed, again, in a respectful tone, in a respectful way. We don't want to hurt the ego of any person who contributed their life to Medinat Israel and to the Jewish people. And therefore, sometimes when I read on social media or hear people talking about the prime minister, about generals, about the army, I say, wait a second, these people gave every minute of their life and sometimes endangered their life for us. So even if you have something very important to say, just say it respectfully. Just try to avoid embarrassment and shaming of someone else. And I think in this situation, feedback is actually creating wonders, because once we get a sincere, honest feedback, this is the only way to improve. But you have to do it in a nice way. Our Torah said, "Hocheach tochiach et amitecha." She repeat twice the word "hocheach tochiach." You should rebuke your friend. And the Mefarshim ask, what does it mean, "Hocheach tochiach"? Why don't you say just like command, rebuke your friend? Because it means that tochiach, first of all, rebuke yourself. Make sure that you come with pure intentions when you are going to rebuke someone else. Number one. Number two, before you rebuke, like rebuke the rebuke, like think, do you have to say everything here? Do you have to say things that might demoralize and shatter the person that you are going to rebuke? So this is a very, very delicate issue. On one hand, to give honest feedback that sometimes can be very difficult to listen to, and at the same time to understand the benefit, the huge benefit for improvement by rebuking or criticizing or recommending what to do.
Rabbi, in that light, one of the questions that constantly comes up nowadays is how to deal with people who disagree with you. I find myself right now in the forefront of fighting against the Trump administration, and that is not something which is in sync with many of our fellow Jews. And I guess the question that I'm asking is how should one deal with a person who disagrees with them, who is not in sync with them, and the issues are extremely important, and sometimes could even be construed. The outcome can be construed as dangerous. What would Judaism or the Torah tell us about how to deal with those individuals who do not agree with you, or you do not agree with them?
If you open any page in the Talmud, you are going to realize that we are a religion based on disagreement. Completely. Every page of the Talmud, I would say on average, contain at least between 4 to 10 disagreements upon statements, upon how to interpret a pasuk or a mishnah or a baraita. And as I said, I think in this, in one of our episodes, I think that is actually why we still exist, although we went through horrible events. Because what a good disagreement means, it means that you have to defend your opinion and I have to defend my opinion, not to build it upon biases, not upon what I think and what I feel, but upon facts, upon truth. And well, people, of course, see things differently, and each one of them have something to say. Listen, let's take something that everyone can identify with. There is a huge dispute ideologically between capitalism and communism. Now, I think that the mistake is that we always take a side and we dismiss the other side. Now, to be honest with you, certainly I'm more a capitalist or seeing what happened to all kind of very lefty or communist countries. I don't want to be like Cuba or like Russia and the misery they brought upon their own people. But can we avoid thinking about like social issues that basically communism tried to solve? Okay, we came to a conclusion that the way communism operates is terrible for the world. But you cannot say that the whole idea of communism is completely wrong. We have to have compassion on other people. We want to help the people who can't. How to do it is a different story. But I think the Jewish way of thinking is really to see both sides and to try to anchor them in certain truth, in certain ideology. And I believe that this balance between one opinion to another over generations gave the Jewish people an ability to, number one, to be open to other opinions and to be able to change sometimes radically from one year to another when they were under a different kind of rules. Number two, among themselves, no one own the truth. And I think for the survival of a nation like this, you must have all the time the balance between two groups who are fighting. And this delicate fight actually keep the balance of the Jewish people so we don't fall to one side or to another. What happened to religions where everyone knows what is the truth? Well, we can see, we can read on the newspaper. When you have no ability to fight ideas within a religion, well, you can get a religion that is on its way to destroy the world.
I've mentioned before that I teach some conversion classes, which have been established by my friend Rav Yossi Saperman and Ellie Rubenstein. And I often go around the table before I get to the issue, which I'm supposed to talk about. And I'm really, really curious and deeply in wonderment as to why somebody would convert. And one of the things that comes up more often than not is that people are critical of the previous religions or ideologies that they were part of. It's often Christianity, in terms of not having the ability to ask questions. And we, every single year when we sit at the Passover table, the fundamental, I guess, 3 letters that really encourage that celebration is WHY, which is why. And we have our children ask that question over and over and over. So I think you're right. I think the beauty of our Jewish people, the beauty of learning and studying is the idea that we can disagree. Not only can we, but we're encouraged to. We are pushed to disagree, and we are pushed to ask questions. And I think that, by and large, as you're saying, is the reason for the survivability of the Jewish people.
Absolutely. These disagreements are welcomed. Again, there is a method to how to disagree.
Yeah.
We have, for example, here in school, we have a debate club. And unfortunately, in the recent years, I could not participate and to come to it. But I see a debate club the most important institution for these days, because you teach students how to debate, not to, to go to smear someone's names, to call names, but really to take an idea and to try to convince the other side in the most respectful way that you are right and he's wrong, and he will do exactly the same. And you know what? Sometimes people leave the room and they say, you know what? I have to revise my opinion about something. I heard something that I didn't know. Maybe, there is something in the other point. I think it's very important. And this is a lost art today. Especially the social media. I get the algorithm of social media actually like people to go to the extreme and not to listen to each other. So I see it by myself. Listen, in the beginning, you are attracted actually to extremism, to people who say very radical ideas because you resist it and you feel like, how can he say that? How can she even raise this issue?
Mm-hmm.
But slowly I realized that it changed me, and not for the better, because when you are exposed to a radical argument that sometimes don't have anything to do with facts, it's just like to embarrass the other one, just to bring all kind of issues from the past, you don't really understand the issue better. You just go to something which is very easy to identify or not identify, instead of learning what is stake, what are the arguments, what is the logic behind things. And I think that in this regard, social media is causing a terrible damage, especially to the young generation. I'm not talking about all the content. I'm talking just about the methodology of how to agree or disagree.
Well, would you say then, Rabbi, that there's a metaphysical force that exists within nature, within our existence, of finding the derech hayim tzai, of finding the middle road?
That's a very interesting issue. And you know what? Maybe one day we should do a podcast about Rabbi Kook. Rav Kook was a great philosopher. I think that he's not well recognized in the general philosophy streams, but he came with a very interesting philosophy. And one of the interesting point, which is a cornerstone, is in his philosophy, is that history and philosophy are going hand in hand. And he shows how there is like an invisible hand, a term that is taken from economics, that direct the history in mysterious ways and bring slowly but gradually and surely a divine plan that through human and through ideologies here making its way to redemption. And he's not afraid, for example, to deal with communism as one of the ways that God bring his master plan into existence. Now, if you hear only this sentence, you will say, okay, Rabbi Gemara is crazy. And of course, I cannot just say one sentence, one piece, because this sounds crazy. But he wrote a beautiful, long, profound ma'amar, article about it. And I think everyone who will read it will start seeing the course of history in a different way. Not many people will not agree with it, obviously. They will see it as a secular, sometimes repetition of mistakes and progress and so on. But to Rav Kook, he saw the hand of God through history and how sometimes very opposite, contradicting ideas actually bring us closer to the final destination.
Rabbi, I wrote down Rav Kook, and in future Shivim Panims, God willing, we will have that discussion. I do want to point out that when I was at your house for Shabbat 2 Friday nights ago, I noticed that in your china cabinet that there's a whole line of Jewish Israeli leadership, little dolls, probably about 3 inches high. It was Rav Kook, one of them, I believe.
Right. He was there. Rabbi Ovadia was there. The same as Ben Gurion and Herzl and others.
Jabotinsky.
These are people that changed the world, or spiritually, or physically, or brought upon the existence of Medinat Israel. By the way, of course, there was someone already that told me that halachically it's not kosher because it's like, like images and so on. Okay, you know what? I'll have to deal with it another time. But you know what? Sitting around the table and watching them give you some inspiration.
Yes, absolutely. I did comment that Jabotinsky looked like Jerry Lewis, actually.
Jabotinsky, you know what? Another 2-3 podcasts. You have to understand, you know what? It's Shivim Panim. So let's just say the following. If Jabotinsky would not be exposed to the Zionist germ or bacteria, so to speak, I have no doubt that he would be one of the greatest literature artists that Russia ever produced.
Mm-hmm.
His level of writing, his level of seeing the world, he was indeed an unbelievable genius in every area that he just touched. If it's literature, poetry, I think even a drawing, his lectures. You know what? We have YouTube today. Go and Google Zev Jabotinsky. Most of his speeches are in Yiddish, so I can understand some of it. But even if you don't understand Yiddish, one word of Yiddish, just the way he conveyed, oh my. Begin was a great student of Jabotinsky, and when you know and hear the speeches of Begin, and you don't know how he mastered this oral talent, just go to Jabotinsky. A person who can stand for 20 minutes with no paper and speak in a way that you cannot leave the screen.
I didn't know this. I didn't know that he was so eclectic, such a Renaissance man. I didn't know that.
Unbelievable. And again, he was a person who was connected to the. Remember, he grew up in Odessa, but you know what? Let's really.
Okay.
Odessa at the time was Paris of the not only Ukraine but Russia, with great young people who came with all kind of ideas, debating ideas. This was the Renaissance of the world in the 19th century, and Jabotinsky was the superstar of all of them, superstar.
Yeah,
But
fascinating.
the moment he touched upon Zionism,
Yes, yes.
his heart turned to another place. Now you have to understand, like, he attracted the most rich and beautiful ladies of the generation. What he did, we have to understand, to me, is like a new Yosef who left the temptation of the wife of Potiphar for a higher purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we don't appreciate it. We don't appreciate the people who sacrifice everything of their life in order to fulfill the Jewish dream.
Very true. So I've written down, and in future Shivim Panim, God willing, we will discuss Rabbi Cook and Jabotinsky's. Ladies and gentlemen, the show is called Parsha Prose, and in it we discuss the Parsha of the week, which in this case is Beshalach, and we do it through the lens of classic literature, and today that is Les Misérables. Let me give you an introduction to both of those. Welcome to today's episode where we dive deep into the timeless wisdom of our Torah. This week we're exploring Parshat Beshalach, a portion filled with powerful moments of faith, miracles, and transformation. In this Parsha, the Israelites, freed from slavery in Egypt, begin their journey into the wilderness. We witness the dramatic crossing of the Red Sea, one of the most iconic miracles in Jewish history, where the waters part to make way for the Israelites and swallow up the pursuing Egyptian army. But this Parsha isn't just about miraculous events. It's about the spiritual journey of the Israelites as they learn to trust in God, even when faced with uncertainty, with hunger, and with fear. We'll also reflect on the significance of the manna, the divine food that sustains the people, in the song of praise, Shir Tayam, sung by Moses and the people after their escape. This Parsha challenges us to think about our own relationship with faith, perseverance, and the idea of trusting in the unseen path ahead. Les Misérables was written by Victor Hugo. It's a sweeping tale of redemption, justice, and the struggle of the human spirit set against the backdrop of post-revolutionary France. The novel follows the life of Jean Valjean, a former convict who seeks to transform his life, but is relentlessly pursued by Inspector Javert, a man obsessed with the law. Through a series of intertwining stories, Hugo examines the impact of social inequity, the search for grace, and the profound power of love and of sacrifice. From the tragic plight of Fantine to the passionate ideals of the student revolutionaries, Les Misérables delves into the complexities of human nature, offering a profound commentary on society, morality, and the enduring fight for justice. Rabbi, I think there's an art form in how you bring the Parsha together with particular novels and have the ability to adjust as we did last week. How did you bring these two together?
Listen, if you think about Jean Valjean and okay, he's now experienced freedom, but what freedom is? The whole book is about the question what freedom means, because as he free from prison, he still have the personality of a person who steal, and he goes to the bishop house and steal the silver candelabra. And through the story, Jean Valjean developed to be a moral person. And if you think about the Jewish people, okay, they left Egypt, but did Egypt left them? Not necessarily. Mm-hmm. They were still a nation of slaves. Now, the Ibn Ezra raised a very interesting question. In our Parsha, 600 trained soldiers are managed to put in unbelievable stress the entire Jewish people, who were hundreds of thousands of males, possibly 2 million people altogether. How is that possible? 600 people. against like a nation of 2 million. And the Ibn Ezra comes with a profound insight that a slave stays a slave for a very long time. And his fear from his master control him or her completely. So seeing 600 trained soldiers of the Egyptian, everyone like had such a fear and panic that they could not function. Because freedom does not mean on that overnight you become like a free person with your ideals, stand for your values and so on. You continue to carry it for very, very long time until you become a free person. And to me, the Parashat Beshalach start this journey from a nation of slaves to be really free people. A journey that actually continue throughout Shmot, Bamidbar, Devarim, until they cross the land to Eretz Israel, until there is a completely new generation, because every one of these generation could not survive, because you needed a completely different mindset in order to be really free. So I think that Hugo described beautifully Jean Valjean as a person that through the story is going through this transformation from a prison to a free person. And he teaches us something very, very important that we are going to learn in 2 parshiot from now. A free person is a person who actually abides to law, to order. You cannot be free unless you are a moral person who knows to value the other one, who knows to value God and even yourself, which is the whole story of Parashat Mishpatim. If not Parashat Mishpatim, if not giving the Torah to the Jewish people, they will be never free, never free. And you know what? We say it many, many times in Haggadah Shel Pesach, something very strange. ואילו לא גאלנו ממצרים, if Hashem would not redeem us out of מצרים, הרי אנו ובנינו ובני בנינו היינו עבדים לפרעה במצרים. So all the generation would be slaves to Pharaoh. Now, that's strange because since the story of Egypt, Egypt is not Egypt, you know, the history made many, many revolutions, and we know that many nations got free. So what does that mean, that we would be slaves to Pharaoh? I think the idea is that slavery is not just like working for someone. Slavery is when your mindset is controlled by someone else. Mm-hmm. And you can control your mind or to know what to do, what is the right values, only when you have like a fixed set of laws that tell you what is right and what is wrong, which is happening when Bnei Israel received the Torah. This made them free. Not just Yetziat Mitzrayim. As I said, when they saw the Pharaoh soldiers, they were not free. They were afraid. They were in panic. They became free only under Har Sinai when they got their own laws and set of values. Now, Javar, by the way, on the other hand, remind me a lot, Pharaoh, you know, this stubborn person that that will not get anything unless it's his way. It's his way or the highway. And you know, the end of Javar, like in the water of the sea, in Pharaoh, in Yam Suf also, like just remind me the same end to Javar and Pharaoh, which is interesting.
Well, you know, Rabbi, within that light, when we talk about freedom from slavery, I think that a subset of that would be courage and bravery, right? And the nation that came out of Egypt did not go into Israel because they had not developed that sense of freedom, hence that courage, that bravery. Yet what's very interesting about this Parsha, in the beginning there was a war, and at the end of it there was a war. A war against the Egyptians was fought predominantly by God. But at the end of it, the war against the Amalekis was fought by Bnei Israel. They seemed to have the courage to fight that fight.
Indeed, if you think about it, who was the person who did it? It was Yoshua. It was the next generation. And indeed, right. Yoshua was the one who brought Bnei Israel to Eretz Israel, because you can see, and remember, the master plan was that Bnei Israel will cross the Jordan after a few weeks. It was not supposed to end in 40 years. but it was not Moshe. Moshe gave the inspiration. You need the young generation, exactly like we see today in Israel. You see this Chayalim, it's just unbelievable. The courage, the dedication, the Mesirut Nefesh, like the willingness to give your life for a greater idea is something that sometimes the old leadership does not possess. And that's why Joshua was chosen afterwards to enter the Jewish people to Eretz Israel. But you have to see the different generations,
Why does the older generation not have that ability?
I think that, it's a question about life in general.
Yes.
Why are we, think about teenagers, and I deal a lot with teenagers, and many times they do stupid things, and I ask myself, like, why God created the human, that in the age of 17 they can do all kind of terrible things that sometimes end with tragedies. We hear every day terrible things, and that's why car insurance companies will not insure children under 18. I think that, in some countries, they consider now to change it to 21 or 22. And there is a reason for it, because the mind and the cortex and the brain is not working like adults. Now, so we, as educators, as parents, get into panic when we see this kind of behavior. But this is one of the mercies of God, to make sure that, every generation is a little bit different than his parents. Because sometimes it's not so good to be like your parent. You have to pave your own way in life. And you cannot do it if you are not a little bit stupid and not like have the ability to take risks. That's what it is. Because if no one will take risks, then we will all be exactly like our parents, which is good in one way and not so good in another way. Because each generation has to bring his own strengths. It's one generation tells the other generation. In ideal situation, you learn from the experience of the previous generations, but you bring your own voice and your own strengths of the new generations. I think that as you get older, you become more conservative in terms of like not taking risks. And that's exactly what happened on Yam Suf. Like, what? We have to fight? We never had this experience against our master. That's impossible. It's unfathomable. We cannot fight against our previous master. The young generation was more free. And therefore, at the end of our Parsha, they started to get used to the idea that they are free people. And if you need to fight for it, you will fight for it. But Moshe and Aaron went on the mountain. They just, spiritually raised and lowered their hands. But the fight itself was done by the young generation, by Yoshua and, the young people.
Rabbi, just a quick synopsis on the book Les Misérables. The novel begins with Jean Valjean, a former convict who was sentenced to 19 years of hard labor for stealing a loaf of bread to feed his sister's starving children. His time in prison shapes his future, leaving him bitter and hardened. After being released from prison, Valjean is treated with a contempt by society due to his criminal record. However, a compassion act by Bishop Mariel, who forgives him for stealing silver and even gives him more, inspires Valjean to change his ways. Taking the bishop's forgiveness to heart, Valjean assumes a new identity as Monsieur Madeleine, becoming a successful businessman and a respected mayor of a small town, determined to live a life of future. And the story goes on about Valjean becomes involved with the student revolutionaries, including Marius Pontmercy, a young man who falls in love with Cosette. After Valjean spares his life during the barricades fighting, Javert grapples with the contradiction in his worldview. Valjean, having lived a life of sacrifice and moral struggle, eventually dies content, surrounded by those he loves, including Cosette and Marius. His final moments are filled with peace, knowing he has fulfilled his promise to Fantine and redeemed himself through acts of kindness and justice. Did you want to add anything to that?
I think that everyone should read beautiful and very influential, by the way. Like great writers like Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, they all were inspired by Hugo, by his ideas. He was quite a pioneer when he entered into the novel themes of justice and fighting for justice and the need for social change. This for sure, send a ripple effect to other countries, to other societies who were inspired by the story of the French Revolution, to the good parts of it, to the sad parts of it, to the constant struggle between the simple people who sometimes suffer cruelty and poverty, and even as he described it, a situation where they have no choice but using prostitution as a way of keeping their life. Terrible situation that many people are not aware of. I think it's a must reading for every young person. And if you did not read it when you were young, do it when you are older. It's really a masterpiece.
Rabbi Shlomo Gomorrah, Inspector Javet's unyielding pursuit of Jean Valjean raises questions about justice and mercy. How can we see a parallel between Javet's obsession with the law and Pharaoh's pursuit of the Israelites after their escape?
Well, I think that Hugo, when he created the figure of the character of his people, apparently was also inspired by the Torah. And Javar, the Inspector Javar, certainly represents something of Pharaoh, namely, you cannot depart and think differently. What was the problem of Pharaoh? Well, it was not just his cruelty towards the Jewish people. I think the Torah knew that over the generation there will be people like Pharaoh, and we cannot escape them. People who are attached to their power, they don't want to give up their power. The main message of the Torah is that we have always to think about our values and be ready to change them. The whole idea of tshuva, which is so important and central to the Jewish thought, means you can change. Actually, you have to change. Sometimes you have to revise and to review everything you do, because there is an alternative which is right and just, and you have to stick to it. Javert represents the person who is not willing even to think differently. And indeed, when he starts to think differently at the end of the novel, he cannot deal with it. He takes his life because for him, there is no room to change the way you see everything around you in your life. And the appearance of mercy, being passionate about things, kindness towards other people, he couldn't take it. It was completely against everything that he lived for. You know, there is a very interesting Orach Chaim, Rabbi Chaim ben Attar, who was a holy person in Morocco, and then he came to Eretz Israel. He's graved in Har Zaytim. And he had an amazing insight into what happened on Egypt at the night where God punished the Egyptian. We discussed it last time about killing the people of Egypt. And he said the following, which is really striking. He said, you know what happened in Egypt? God just entered Egypt. The righteous people, the people who were ready to the presence of God, they were inspired. These are the Jewish people. The whole idea of bringing a sacrifice, the whole idea of being in the house with the families, gave them the strength to draw, so to speak, the divine presence of God to their heart and to their mind. Mm-hmm. The Egyptians were not ready for the appearance of divine presence in their midst. And the shock, so to speak, and the powerful presence of God, that's what killed them. So it was not like that God went with the carrot and the stick, like the stick for the Egyptians and the carrot for the Jewish people. It was just the presence of the unbelievable divine presence in the streets of Egypt that inspired the Jews and killed the Egyptians. And something, again, I don't want completely to parallel it, but I think that the appearance of kindness and caring about others inspired Jean Valjean, and this was what killed Javert. So it depends on us how we approach the same things in life, but it will influence different people in sometimes contradicting ways.
Yeah, it's interesting when you take a look at in recent history, American history, people like Bull Connor, who are at the forefront of trying to hold down the black community or fighting for their civil rights. The McCarthy area, both of these people had an inability to adjust, and both of them died broken men.
Interesting, which is another lesson. Sometimes, um, you don't fulfill your life mission, but you leave it to the next generation to do it, and hopefully someone will take it from there.
Do you think when the Torah says that the Egyptians, that the Jews were matzachem b'einai in the eyes of the Egyptians, is that because of the holy presence that they were impacted by it?
Very possible, very possible. Um, and I think that the simple Egyptian were not addicted to their own power,
Yeah.
as Pharaoh. They started to realize that the Jewish people are not that bad as Pharaoh tried to convince them. Remember, who gave this bad name to the Jewish people? It was Pharaoh who said, "Ki tikrena milchama v'nosaf gamu al soneinu." These people are going to, are so evil, and they are going to turn against us and to, fight against us. And, when you have this kind of propaganda, it influences people. But the less power holds, people can start thinking a little bit differently. And I think that's what happened, because to me, it's one of the biggest surprise. What happened to the Egyptians that they were willing to let the Jews borrowing their gold and silver? I think that at a certain point, they started to see that the Jews are not what they were told are.
Yes.
And they are interesting people. They have something to offer, and people wanted to be partners of the Jewish people. And I'm sure that it will happen again, one day, that the people will understand that we are just a source of blessing to the world, not chas v'chalila hold any evil and any of the terrible, dirty propaganda that many people have against the Jewish people.
But by the way, why do you say borrowed from the Egyptians? When did we return it?
That's a good question. It was
I always
discussed.
wondered. I wondered about that.
Many people believe that, they were entitled to this. You had people working for you for hundreds of years. They build Egypt for free. It's time to leave. Give them something. And we have a mitzvah in the Torah, a very beautiful mitzvah, that, when you have a person who works for you, there is a mitzvah of ha'anaka, of giving him a present when he
Yes.
leaves.
Yes.
Which means more than just giving him like social benefits or welfare or something like this. Part of freedom is the ability to own things. And I think the Torah is quite aware to it, based on the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, that redemption, without giving them property to own, will not be a redemption. Because ownership is one of the important forms of freedom. Now, about the borrowing, it was never returned, I guess.
Moshe Scherer, who fought for reparations for the Jewish people after the Holocaust, he made a point of saying, listen, I'm not asking you for blood money. I'm not asking you to pay for the death of every Jew. What I'm asking you is to give us back what you took from us.
which they will never be able to.
No.
Until
Right.
this very day, you have banks in Switzerland and elsewhere who are um, having Jewish money. But cruel as it sounds, if you cannot prove that you were killed in Auschwitz, your heirs are not going to get your money.
Yes.
And the day that this injustice is going to be resolved, billions upon billions of dollars will be returned again to the hands of the Jewish people, and they will know what to do with it. They will know the world is going to benefit. But this is something that people don't talk about the evil of taking Jews' money and never returning to them. Even the pitsuim, the compensation of the German people, people should go to the details of it. I'm sure that in Wikipedia you can read about it. Ben Gurion desperately needed the money for the newborn Jewish land, and he was with the lower hand here. The Germans had the money, and they had the upper hand, like many times, like the rich it treat the poor. But they came to a point that, for example, if you could value the work in the forced labor camps for $4, let's say the benefit of working there, they took away $1 or 1 mark for the food that they gave the workers. It came to just read about it to understand that even when they gave the money, they did not give it because they respected the Jewish people, but they wanted to clean their guilt, and they did it in the most ungenerous way, unfortunately. But Baruch Hashem, God takes care over the Jewish people. Our success after the Holocaust is not just because we are smart and talented. There is a lot that Hashem blessed the Jewish people, and the beautiful thing is that most Jewish people, when they are blessed, they share it with the community, with the world.
Rabbi, in Beshallach, the Israelites face hunger and uncertainty in the desert, just as Valjean faces countless challenges on his journey. How do both the Israelites and Valjean learn to trust in something greater than themselves in times of hardship?
I think this is the greatest test that every human being has. We want to have like a solid ground under our feet. That's a human nature tendency. We want to know that we have food for tomorrow, for our children for tomorrow. We cannot go to sleep at night if we don't know that there is something in the refrigerator for tomorrow. And the test that the Jewish people went through in the desert was exactly on this point. Like, you trust Hashem to give you the food for tomorrow. And it's a very, very difficult thing. But again, it's part of freedom, not to rely on the food of your master that he will give you, the meager slice of bread and maybe some water or tea to drink. It's a belief that God is going to take care over you. And I think that Jean Valjean also, in his unbelievable experience in the bishop house of mercy, of kindness, gave him the strength to deal with the uncertainties of life. Certainly, there is no question that he was a very talented guy, to become the mayor of a city and to run like the business and everything. There is no question about his talent. But I think more than that, he learned that there is something that guides us, something that drives us on a daily basis, which gave him the strength to be kind to others, to make sure that others are not going to suffer a terrible life. And as I said before, there is something in the journey described in Victor Hugo book here, Aluvei Chaim in Hebrew, Les Misérables in French or in English, about the journey, about the transformation that people go from this tendency to rely on the master, on having like solid ground under their feet, to a situation where you really don't know what will happen tomorrow, but you have the hope and the faith that God is not going to leave you alone.
Rabbi, there's a wonderful quote, or many, many wonderful quotes in the book Les Misérables. One of which is to love another person is to see the face of God. Is that a Jewish thought?
I believe so. I don't know if it was inspired by a Jewish source or most likely by a Christian one, which is inspired at the end of the day by Jewish sources. But what do you think is B'Tselem Elokim? B'Tselem Elokim means that every human being have an image of God within him. If it's on the face, if it's on his neshama, I don't know. But sensitive people can see other people and to see not only the people, but really the image of God within them.
Jean Valjean transforms his rootedness and his ability to forgive and to let go of bitterness. In contrast, Pharaoh's refusal to release the Jewish people and his eventual pursuit of vengeance reflects a dramatically different path. What does Beshallach teach us about the consequence of revenge versus the power of forgiveness?
There is no question that Les Misérables is influenced heavily by Christian thought. We are not at this point in Parsha Beshalach of forgiving the Egyptians for all the terrible things they did to the Jewish people. Remember, there were mothers there that lost their children, thrown to the Nile and killed by Pharaoh and his officers. I don't think this was the time for forgiveness. At the same time, going forward to the Sefer of Devarim, we have a mitzvah not to harm an Egyptian person, and actually to be grateful for what? For the time that we spent in Egypt when there was a famine, and therefore in the fourth generation of Egyptian, he can mingle into the holy nation of the Jewish people. By conversion, something that, for example, the Moabites and the Ammonites, for lack of kindness, will be never able to convert and to mingle into the Jewish people. That tells you something about how time can heal or change perspective of what we went through. So there was no forgiveness, at least not one that is described in the Tanakh. But there was, I would say, a process of accepting and rebuilding relationship. And please remember, our King Solomon, he married the daughter of Pharaoh at the time. Mm-hmm. If they would be so unforgivable, I don't think that Shlomo HaMelech will take the daughter of Pharaoh. By the way, he was criticized for this. There is no question. But I think when you read the Tanakh, you see that Shlomo developed relationship with all the empires around because we don't want to remember forever what they did to us. And we try to find new ways to reestablish our relationship with them without forgetting what happened.
So am I correct that there's no chiyuv, there's no obligation for the Jewish people to forgive the Egyptians, to forgive the Nazis, to forgive the Spanish for the Inquisition?
Not at all. Not at all. On the contrary, I think we have to remember it, and at times, actually, to remind them that. I don't think that there is anything bad about it. I don't think we do it in order to say, like, the Jewish people are not about victimhood, and that's what separates them from many, many other nations that were oppressed and still oppressed. We don't want to take our victimhood and to make it like the main tool in our disposal. We want to make our victimhood to two things. Number one, to treat others with a very different way. And many times the Torah reminds us, Ki ger hayita be'eretz Mitzrayim, zechor, ki eved hayita be'eretz Mitzrayim. We have to remember our experience in order to treat others differently, number one. Number two, we have to remember this is important to our survival instinct that, you know, at times people were evil to us. If we are going to forgive them for that, I think we are going to lose a major part of our survival instinct. We don't forgive. We don't. But we turn the hatred and the need for revenge to build our nation. I think that's a big difference. And the
Interesting.
biggest, and the, you know, I always remember my mother-in-law and other Holocaust survivor. They always said when they had like a new baby, when they had the simcha, they always say this is our victory over Hitler, and they were absolutely right because they took the revenge, the energies of revenge in order to build, and that's what separates us from many other people who just raise the flag of victimhood and crying and don't change their situation.
Yet the Torah does tell us not to hate the Egyptians.
Exactly.
Okay, Rabbi, finally, it's a very interesting aspect of this parsha and a few other parshiot or throughout Tanakh, the idea of songs. Now, after crossing the sea, the Israelites sing a song of praise to God. It's a beautiful, beautiful shir.
Yeah.
Similar, and it's a machloket how they sang it. Did
Right.
Moses lead? It's a four-way machlokas. Similarly, music and song have a powerful emotional role in Les Misérables. What role does song play in both the Torah portion and the novel in expressing liberation, faith, and hope?
Singing is a mark of freedom.
Yeah.
People who are slaves are not singing. They lamenting maybe and they crying, but not singing. And I think the singing, both here and in Les Miserables, is a sign of transformation, of changing your situation. Um, by the way, I must to share with you a beautiful insight that I heard from one of my teachers, Rav Neria Zechono Livracha, and he came with a very interesting idea. He said, you know, the we see that in the Egel, in the golden calf, many Jewish males participated, and you know that's very difficult to understand. This happened a short time after they crossed the Red Sea. They sang such a beautiful song to God, and they failed miserably in the golden calf scene. He said it's very interesting that no woman participated in this scene, and they kept away from it. And he said something amazing. He said, "I'll tell you why," because he said it in a time where we were very young educated, and he said the following: Moshe Rabbeinu just sang the words and inspired with his poetry the entire nation. But Miriam did something different. Miriam took some music instruments, ותיקח את התוף בידה, and they were dancing and they were singing with music instruments, and they say that make the whole difference, because when you use music in your education, when you teach students to dance and to be happy, they will be very different if than just teaching them the beautiful words of the Torah. You have to create an atmosphere of singing with your students in order to inspire them. This is going to last, as we see with the women that did not sin in the golden calf. They still had this experience that Miriam took them through of singing and dancing, something that the males lacked. Isn't it beautiful?
It is beautiful, and it brings to mind that when I was at your house for Shabbat, I think the most beautiful part of the evening was when I sang Zemirot to you from my father, and I looked at you at some point. You closed your eyes, and you were really listening very closely and taking in the beautiful tunes. And I listened to your tunes as well. That made such a difference to the evening, you know.
Thank you for reminding me, because I'm insisting of learning this tune that I heard before. I must say that. My father, Sheyarich Yamim, he
Amen.
also sing, but only part of it, of the Kol Mekadesh Shevi, and I will appreciate if one of our listeners can send me a recording of Kol Mekadesh Shevi.
Yeah, that's the one I sang. Yeah.
But I don't know the end. Maybe you have to sit
I'll
one
record it for you.
to teach me this song. It's a beautiful. It's a very like going
Beautiful.
to straight to the heart.
It's very stirring. Ladies and gentlemen, I have a poem here on Parsha Beshallach through the lens of Les Misérables, and I'd like to read it to you. I did not write it. It was written by AI or created by AI. Beneath the weight of Egypt's chains, the people bound by endless pains cried out for mercy, hope, and light, their hearts aflame through endless night. In darkness, Valjean sought to flee like Israel from the raging sea, a path unknown through waters wide where faith and courage must collide. The waves rolled back, the earth did shake, a miracle for freedom's sake. As Pharaoh's wrath was swept away, a new dawn breaking with the day. But even in that moment pure, doubt lingered his heart unsure. Like Valjean with justice on his heels, the burden of the past he feels. In deserts dry, they sought to find manna, mercy, peace of mind, the bread from heaven freely given, like grace bestowed from sin forgiven. Yet hunger's call was loud and clear as struggles rose and doubts drew near. Still the song of faith would rise, a hymn to heaven, to the skies. The Israelites, like Valjean's soul, were learning still to be made whole through trials vast and storms so wild, the price of freedom deep and mild. For just as Jean Valjean did strive to find a way to stay alive, the chosen marched with hearts afire towards justice, hope, and a land entire. So let us learn from paths they trod, from Moses' staff and Valjean's God, that freedom's light, though hard to see, is born through love and destiny. In every trial and every fight, we find our way and claim our right. Through faith, through grace, through heart and hand, we build a world, we take a stand.
Very beautiful. I have great news for you, Avrum.
Oh, good. I like that.
I decided to learn a little bit more about AI, the entire revolution. And I actually asked my ChatGPT to give me to send me a lesson every day of 15 minutes about creating bots and to understand better like the opportunities in AI. Listen, my son sent me a fantastic podcast, almost as good as ours, Avrum, of two experts, Israeli experts of AI. Wow, you know what? I was sitting on the Friday before the Shabbaton and listening to it, and I didn't know if to be extremely happy, extremely terrified. But I came to the conclusion that there is no question that AI is going to drive our life in the next few years. I don't want to think like what is expecting around the corner of AI, but AI is going to be big and important. And instead of like trying to hide yourself from it, I think it's about time for me at least to face it and to learn the benefits from it, especially for education. So I will try to do it. I don't think that I will do the poetry. I will leave it to you, Avram.
Fair enough.
But I will try to understand like the promise of AI to education. I think it's the first time that actually it gives the ability of every student to get a fair, immediate feedback to improve. You know, the hocheach tocheach that we spoke before, like feedback is the most important thing for students. And sometimes you have to wait days, if not weeks, until you get the feedback on your test or, and if you get the feedback, you sometimes don't know what to do with it. AI on the lowest level is going to enable every student to be his own teacher and someone who give him like encouragement and feedback and correct his mistakes and teach him how to do it better in a very short time. I find it incredible. But at the same time, as I say, there will be some problems, but I think that you would like the idea that I start to expose myself to AI and to,
Yes, and I embrace myself. I must tell you, I give myself accolades because I was makar of you. I introduced you to something that, as an educator, Rabbi, someone who grows constantly, doesn't stay in the same place. I think it's so incredibly important that you have a sense of what AI is all about. And I would ask you to send me that video because I'd love to watch it.
It's all in Hebrew, but I think you are going to love it. It's incredible.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank everybody for watching and for viewing. And I would ask you to take so many lessons out of this podcast, Parsha and Prose, about freedom, about the spirit of humankind, about courage, and about freedom. There is so much here really to study and to learn and to know. Really dive deeply and understand what the words of freedom are all about. Understand what it means of God taking the Jewish people out of Egypt through the hands of Moshe and Aaron, his shlichim, and to ultimately taking them to a place where they could actualize themselves as Jews, could actualize themselves as human beings. The idea that manna fell from heaven is a phenomenal thing. It's what we call a chesed. It's a kindness that God extended to the Jewish people, so that despite the hardships of walking through the desert for 40 years, they had what to eat. They didn't have to hunt. It was available to them. This is a story of kindness. It's a story of giving and of love. It's a story of godliness. Rabbi, any concluding words?
I just would like to ask our listeners one thing. Listen, guys, we do this podcast as a different or alternative way of a share. We could develop many of the ideas here for a frontal lecture. We don't want to do it. We want it to be a discussion. We want it to be learning together. Do me one favor. If you enjoyed something, if you have a question, just put it in. YouTube are very generous to allow you to express your gratitude, criticism, rebuking, whatever you want.
Yeah.
But let's make it something alive, not something that you watch and you leave. Let's make it a discussion. And thank you very much for your likes. Thank you even more for your comments. And hopefully we are going to see you there. We want you to be part of it.
Beautifully said, Rabbi. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again. We look forward to being with you next week. God willing, Am Yisrael Chai. Be proud to be a Jew. And until then, Zai Gesund and be healthy.